Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the fourth live Trotec Laser UK question and answer session. Today, my name is James, and we are joined by our expert panel, Mr. Chris Green, who is the area manager for Scotland and North East of England, and Mr. Trevor Stevenson, who is the area manager for North West of England. Good to have you with us, guys.
Hello.
Hello. You all right?
Nice to have you joining us today. We're all coming at you live from the sunny North East of England, and I'm not telling a lie, it is actually sunny up here for a change. Now, if you've never joined us for one of our Q&A sessions, just to give you a bit of a format, firstly, drop a comment in the live chat just to let us know that you're watching and that you're there, and that you can hear us, of course, so we're not just having this private group chat between us. And then what we're going to do is going to go through the questions that we've already received. We've got about 5 or 6, but if there's any new questions come in, we will answer them throughout the course of this video. So are you guys ready to start?
Yep.
Yeah, go ahead, James.
Excellent. So the first question we have today is, I have a 20-watt fiber laser. A customer has asked me to mark nickel-plated steel parts with Cermark, and we're having limited success. Can't get the Cermark to bond sufficiently. Do you guys have any tips?
Yeah, I mean, normally you use Cermark with a CO2 laser, and you're applying the Cermark material, which I'll describe as like a clay-like material that dries on. Then we use a CO2 beam, high power, relatively low speed to generate heat to get the material to bond onto the surface and leave a black mark. But typically, fiber laser is used for engraving metal. So if it's something that's nickel plated, a fiber laser will generally, you can either mark it by moving it really quickly and be quite gentle with the nickel plating, or you're going to be engraving through the nickel into the base metal. So I would say that the Cermark is going to be used for CO2 laser. Wouldn't you, Chris?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Yeah, definitely. I've never used Cermark with a fiber laser, so I can't really comment, but it's that process really. I'd definitely use a CO2 for it. I wouldn't be using a fiber.
And when I've used CO2 and Cermark, I'm not normally using 100% of the power that I've got available, and then depending on the metal and how it bonds, very little in terms of speed. So it could be maybe 20%, maybe 30%. You're going to get different results with the different metals.
Excellent. That's great advice, guys. Now, the next question that we have is come in, and I will give a bit of an introduction to this. I would like to know if anybody has any recommendations for getting a consistent dark etching on AlumaMark Satin Silver. I have a rayjet machine and produce identification labels. So if you guys don't know, AlumaMark is a product that we supply. Good grief, what's going on with that screen there? There we go. It's an aluminium that's designed for processing with low laser powers, and we supply in 6 different finishes, which you can see here on our web shop. And generally speaking, it's used for signs, plaques, trophy plates, barcoding, that kind of thing. So if you guys want to offer a bit of advice on the actual processing of the material.
Yeah, to get a to get a dark mark on AlumaMark, we have to run the laser out of focus around about 3.5 mil. We don't need a lot of power. We roughly need around about 20% power if we're using the rayjet. But one of the critical points is to run it quite slow engrave, so between 50 and 60% if it's percentage speed power. That enables us to get the heat into the product and not cause any banding in the text or the photograph or the picture. So that's what I would use on my advice. Run it out of focus, low power, around about 20%, 50-60% speed. Would you agree with that, Trev?
That sounds about right. That's probably the way I'd approach it.
There is actually a document on the AlumaMark website that gives you a couple of tips that you can download as a PDF. So they're quite open to give you some settings for not only our machines, for anyone else's as well.
How would you say the material compares? Obviously, if there's anybody out there just doing regular aluminium or anodized, how would you say it compares to doing those, Chris?
So anodized aluminium you can get in black. Obviously, if you laser engrave that, that'll turn white. But what we're doing here is we've got a satin silver that we can get a dark mark on. So anodized aluminium with a satin silver, we'll laser that with a CO2 and we'll get a white mark rather than a black, which we'll do with AlumaMark. So AlumaMark's great for that sort of process.
Excellent. That's good advice there for anybody who's obviously not sure what the main differences are. The next question that we have in, and again, you guys probably hear this a lot in your demos, is what's the maximum workpiece height for a Trotec laser?
That's going to depend which Trotec laser you've got. The maximum height on a Speedy 400 is 305mm. That's obviously quite a big machine, 1000 by 600 just over in terms of bed size, and obviously you've kind of got that depth. A Speedy 300, I think it's 180mm.
Yeah, got
and
all
then
that,
I think Speedy 100 is about 150, and then I'm not sure on the depth on like on a Rayjet.
It's about 120 from what I remember.
So on all of the machines we can get box-like objects in, and I know I've got quite a few of my customers, especially at this time of year, are preparing to do gift boxes, Christmas Eve boxes, that type of thing. So yeah, a lot of those people in like the personalisation industry, they've got Speedy 100, Speedy 300s. So yeah, they can fit those kind of depths in there. But the biggest height, 305mm on a Speedy 400.
Excellent. Do you have anything else to add to that one, Chris? Or
No, nothing to answer. Trevor's right. 300. Yeah, we can't get any bigger, unfortunately.
Perfect. No problem at all. The next question that we have, again, we hear a lot. Can you laser cut metal with a Trotec laser? But metal foils is obviously a different thing. So, do you guys have any advice to impart on this subject, or?
I think we do have a customer somewhere that'll cut very thin foils using a fiber laser, quite high powered fiber. I think it's a 50 watt Speedy 300, I believe, 0.3, 0.2 of a mil. So it depends on the metal foil. It's always worth us testing it before you commit to purchasing a laser for that particular use.
I know I did some material testing for a customer yesterday where they got a lot of textiles that were covered in various different materials, polyurethane, etc. And one of the materials was for fireproofing, for components and areas for the automotive industry. So you've got a very thin layer of foil, then you've got some fire retardant material, and then another very thin layer of foil. So we were able to cut it, obviously using quite high power of about 120 watts, and then really slow. So I was using a speed of about 0.2 in Trotec terms, and I was able to cut the material. It was able to bond the edges of the fire retardant material in the middle without it fraying, and then also penetrate through the other side of the foil. But generally speaking, you are talking for cutting metal specifically a lot higher wattages. But with the foils, it's going to depend on the thickness of the foil, and you might need to make multiple passes.
It's excellent. That's good advice, that one, Trev. We've just had a question come in live on YouTube from Sam, who says, I have a 120 watt Speedy 400. When cutting TroLase material or TroLase ADA, we always get sticky edges on the cut. How can we prevent this?
Great question, to be honest, Sam. We've got a lot of power with your 120 watt Speedy 400 there. Depending on the thickness of the TroLase or the TroLase ADA, say 1.6 mil is something that I always kind of cut. You will always get a little bit of a sticky edge. However, you don't need all the cutting power there. So I'd try and cut a little bit lower, maybe 70% power on the cut. That generates less heat, obviously, so that less stickiness on it. But you will always get a little bit, unfortunately. Anything to add on that one, Trevor? Have you done any TroLase recently?
Yeah, as you said with TroLase, there's always a bit of a sticky edge just because of the material that it's made of. The other, as I said, is look at using less power, and it'd be interesting to know what lens is using. If we're using something, typically most people are using a 2-inch lens. Obviously, if you can use a smaller lens with a smaller beam size of like a 1.5 lens, we're ablating and moving less material away. So we've got a bit of a sharper edge, so to speak. So that can also help. But yeah, I would think a lot of it is going to be around just your power and speed settings.
I think just as well for any other customers or indeed people watching who use our materials, obviously ADA and TroLase are slightly different because TroLase is 2 to 3 ply, whereas ADA is single ply. So is it likely that obviously the more plies in the material will generate more residue, or is it again just purely down to your settings?
Well, with your TroLase, the colour on the top is probably a couple of microns thick, so that's not going to be generating any of the stickiness. I think it's the materials. Is it PMMA? That sound right, Chris?
Yeah.
It's just the nature of what happens. That material, the properties it's got that allows it to laser cut, and obviously using a super hot focus beam of light to cut through the material, it just produces a little bit of a sticky edge, which does reduce in stickiness within time, doesn't it? Within half an hour, it's less stickier. With a couple of hours after that, some people will just give it a bit of a wipe just to clean it up, but the stickiness does go away.
It's good advice, guys. Paulina on Facebook has just commented as well, saying you can use masking tape where you're cutting. Obviously, I'm assuming that's in response to Sam's comment about how you can reduce the stickiness. That's some good advice as well. Let me just check the next question. Okay.
Actually, I wonder if Sam's talking about the residue on the top as when you're cutting, but again, that's power, isn't it?
Yeah, just reduce that a little bit. I always find it wipes off with, sometimes we use a little bit of methylated spirits or soapy water, believe it or not, works just as well, I find.
That's actually good. Obviously, it's everybody's got access to that. Not necessarily you don't have meths lying around, but use a bit of soap and water. Magic. Yep. Next question we've got that's coming, guys, is what's the difference between different laser sources? So obviously, we do fiber and CO2, so it's quite a general question. But you know, what are the main application differences? Is what I'd assume is being asked here.
So we supply 2 different laser sources. We either supply a fiber laser source or a CO2 laser source. A fiber laser source predominantly for marking metals. We could mark some plastics and some dark acrylics. Black acrylic marks quite well with it. A CO2 laser predominantly for marking anything else, really, from cutting paper to cutting acrylics to engraving acrylics, woods. So it's quite a versatile laser, the CO2.
Well, there's also another way you can answer that question as well, Chris. When you talk about the difference between different laser sources, because obviously with CO2, you've also got glass tube, metal tube, and then ceramic tube. So again, they're all CO2 laser tubes. Glass tube is less expensive. It's quite basic, but it has limitations in terms of how fast we can make the laser tube fire. So within a cutting application, glass tube is absolutely fine because we're not really moving the arm of the laser from left to right very fast. It's all fairly straightforward, slow motion. When it comes to engraving, glass tube laser, you are limited by how fast we can make the tube fire for how fast we can engrave. So a typical glass tube engraving speed is going to be somewhere between 300, 400 millimeters a second. Metal tubes are more sophisticated. We've got more control over them in terms of peak power and low power, how we can use more of it or less of it. And we can also make a metal tube laser fire faster. So a typical speed for a metal tube laser will be somewhere between 1.5, maybe 2 meters a second. So we can engrave probably 3-4 times faster than a glass tube. The ceramic tubes that we use in the Speedy series, we've got even more control over the speed and power, and we can make that tube fire even faster. So on the Speedy 400 that we mentioned earlier, we can make that machine engrave it. Is it 4.2 meters a second, 4.3 meters a second?
That's right, Trevor, yeah, 4.2, yeah.
So because we can fire the laser tube faster, we can also move the arm from left to right faster. So a ceramic tube can produce engraving maybe 6-8 times faster than a glass tube laser. So that's the difference between the CO2 varieties of tube. And obviously Chris is talking about CO2 and fiber.
Excellent. That's good points there, guys. And I think that'll tie in. I'll just double check to see if there's any new live comments coming. No, we have nothing new live. This one came in beforehand as well. And I'm looking to buy my first laser and I'm overwhelmed by the choice available. So what's the difference between a premium and all the cheaper lasers? I guess this guy's seeing a lot when he's doing his online research and probably going on a lot of forums.
There's a lot of things to consider when you're purchasing a laser. We always find that's what we always offer you to come in, and we can show you the difference between all the different ranges that we have. But when you talk about a premium and a cheaper laser, normally the cheaper side of it are a glass tube laser, like Trevor explained it with the glass tube, and more the premium lasers we have with a ceramic or laser tube, maybe a bit more higher power, 120 watts we have available here. And then there's also bed size as well to consider. We come across this all the time, Trev, don't we? We get asked the question, you know, where should I purchase my first laser from, or why should I come to Trotec, or which one should I actually purchase? There's quite a various different answers to that question. Really depends on what you want to do and the volume that you want to produce. Would you agree with that, Trev, or not?
Yeah, and we see a lot of people who buy a unbranded laser over the internet, kind of unseen. They learn to use that because they're interested, and then it's a hobby, which is great. And the more creative you get in terms of your design, you'll always start off with little items. Your items get bigger. They then get more complicated. I think then when you see people turning a hobby into probably a fledgling small business, that changes again because the needs change. And then when businesses grow, they need more accuracy, more precision, more speed, more production. So we see quite a few people who will start off kind of making acrylic jewelry in a garage or something like that. The business takes off, which is absolutely fantastic. The customer will sometimes go from having a small unbranded Chinese machine that they bought off the internet and it's been absolutely fine. They might buy another one or a bigger machine. That machine might give them all sorts of untold problems. So because there's a lack of service, you are literally buying a box and there's very limited assistance that you're going to get other than Facebook forums, which are great because there will have been people who've experienced that. What we tend to see more and more of, and we've seen a huge amount of this year, is people have had this fledgling business, this idea. It's really took off, especially during lockdown, because personalization has gone absolutely mad. And people are wanting to put extra capacity in to meet the demand because there's Black Friday coming, there's Christmas coming, which is absolutely phenomenal. Some people are looking at buying another machine, but they haven't got the room. So they're having to look at premises. Whereas when you look at the difference between something like a Speedy 300, a Speedy 300 can produce 6 times as much as a glass tube machine when there's a lot of engraving involved. So sometimes the jump in price can seem quite high, but when you look at how much production that you can make within the same space of time off one machine and still be able to work from home, work from garages, things like that. So it all depends where you are, and I hate to use the word journey, but I think it all depends where you are in your journey and where you are with lasers and your ideas and your creativity, because the platforms are out there. Etsy, Not on the High Street, Amazon, eBay, and many, many others are available. We've got loads of customers who do all those platforms and their own websites, but it gets to a point where just buying another machine isn't always the right answer. Sometimes it's looking at buying a different machine that will just do more and make you more productive. And that's the big difference, really.
Thing as well, to add my 5 cents on the subject as well, we always talk about at Trotec, you're buying, it's not just a machine, and you touched on it earlier, Trevor, it's the full package. You've got support network, you've got experienced people who will be able to advise you, as opposed to going on the forums, which are great, but there's nothing quite like somebody who's dealt with loads of different industries as opposed to a hobbyist on Facebook, so to speak.
Well, the forums are very, very helpful. people will gladly kind of give advice and everything. The difficulty is that on the forums, a lot of the people have got different machines. So the speed and power settings aren't always kind of relevant with it. And it's just with settings, I think a lot of it's experience, just getting to know your machine and testing.
Excellent. That's great advice there, guys. This isn't a question, but we've had a hello come in from our customers. Amy at Mischief Pop, people watching might have seen her. She does a lot of the Canada videos on our Rayjet laser challenges. Hi there, Amy. Thank you for watching. I'm just going to double check that we've got any more questions. No, it doesn't look like we have any more live questions, and we've answered all of our ones that have come in previously. So do you guys have any maybe tips that you want to share just while we've got a bit of time? Any just general laser tips?
Wow. The best laser tip really is to get in contact with us really and ask for advice. If you're looking for a new laser, that is, even if you've got a product that you'd like us to test, we can dip that into the previous question. I've got customers that when we talk about support, I've got customers that'll ask me to run maybe a test in the showroom to see if they can get some different settings or get an optimal setting, so then I can send them their settings for their machine. So that's one of a tip that I would have if you've got a Trotec, or if you haven't, just feel free to talk to us.
Yeah, and if there are any materials, especially from our catalogue, that you are struggling to process, just get in touch, and what we'll do is we'll do our best to try and give you a starting place to set off. Obviously, the Trotec machines are working on percentage of speed and power, etc. But we know what the speeds are, we know what the powers are, so we'll try and kind of work it back just to give you a starting point on your machines as well, if we can.
Excellent, great advice, guys. Thank you. So it doesn't look like we have any new questions come in. So thank you everybody who's watched today, and thank you guys for joining me. Hopefully you found it beneficial, and stay tuned, because every first Thursday of every month is when we hold these Q&A sessions. So tune in for the next one in November. Thank you for your time today, guys.
See ya.
Thank you.